Good morning, Philadelphia, and welcome to a great new edition of Race on Main. Don't forget you can watch all of our past episodes at raceonmain.com, but before that we have a great show with Dr. Vivian Shnaidman,
a forensic psychiatrist and the author of Forensic Psychiatry, A Lawyer's Guide, and she's going to talk about all the dark recesses of your sick mind.
Sounds like a great show. Good morning, Philadelphia, and welcome to another great edition of Race on Main. Thanks for joining us. We have a terrific show today. I think probably one of the more interesting shows. Dr. Vivian Shnaidman from Jersey Forensic Consulting is here, and she's going to talk all about psychiatry and how it relates to really the criminal world, and talk about her book that is a guide for lawyers related to the topic. So we're very thankful to have her here. So, and for all of you out there watching, you can always check out our past episodes at raceonmain.com. There's tons of information, there's tons of details about our past guests and information that they might have to help you through your day on Main Street. So as we get started, I want to introduce my brother and co-host and partner, Andy Richter. We did that from last time, right?
Conan O'Brien.
Yeah, right. So Stuart, how are you? How are things
I'm
going?
good. I'm looking forward to this guest because I want her to psychoanalyze you and tell me about all the dark corners that it's a scary place, you know, in there. So
just the safest thing for me to do is just keep my mouth shut.
Just let her.
Yeah.
Just ask the question and nod. Well,
Yeah,
we'll certainly
that's
get to that. But first, we spent the last show talking about the Saudis. Let's spend this show talking about the Chinese.
Okay.
And particularly the mergers and acquisitions industry that is erupting in China right now.
Huge.
In first quarter 2016, the Chinese set a record for outbound M&A by doing 115 deals, which was up 51% from a year ago. But more importantly, 82.6 billion.
Right, and that's not just in the United States. I mean, that's
it's
around the globe, right?
Worldwide.
Right. But a significant portion of that is here in the United States. Wow.
And we got to ask ourselves, why? Why are they doing
why?
it? Why?
So a couple of things. Well, I shouldn't say I know why, but I think I have a good
what are your
reason
thoughts?
as to it. My thoughts are that the type of governmental uncertainty there is, let's say, more prevalent than in lots of other places. So as a way to secure their dollars from what potentially could be a turn in government policy, issues like that, changes to the laws that happen potentially more rapidly than in other places, to protect their holdings, quite frankly.
So you're
offshoring
suggesting
money.
that this is private money that's headed out of China?
I think it's probably a combination of both, but still, you know, you move your dollars to the United States, you're going to follow the United States rules related to those investments here, whether it's private, public, whatever. And I have a feeling that that has a lot to do with it, that there's more certainty here and more certainty in specific areas of Europe primarily, where there's a comfort level as it relates to the risk that comes about based on these investments that are making them sleep a little better at night, I suppose.
I shudder to hear myself say this, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's really, you know, all about diversifying assets,
Yep.
and to some extent also it's about increasing competitiveness.
Yeah,
which
that's a huge part of it. You're right.
Kind of a little bit scary because, you know, Chinese wealth is heavily involved in U.S. government-backed securities right now.
Tons.
And the fact that now they're taking over the private sector also is a little bit scary to me.
You wonder if there's too much going into, let's say, you know, or too much of another country's influence economically right within our own four walls. I mean, I think that that's been something that economists have talked about and have warned about for a good while at this point.
So do you think this is something that Main Street has to worry about, that it's going to be, you know, this picture of our Chinese overlords or something.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that. I did read, and I'd love to see if I could dig up the article where I thought this worried me quite a bit, and I don't know what group, if it was the Chinese government, if it was industry or private wealth, were looking to buy up aspects of various state turnpikes because they would fix the roads, keep the money for the tolls, like they would, those kinds of things.
As an investment.
As an investment, and I thought, whoa, that's a little bit, that's frightening to me.
So they would come in and they would what? Buy the turnpike from the Commonwealth?
That's what I had read. Now, again, it could be just some very, very wealthy billionaire Chinese individual who says, hey, you know what? I might be able to fix your highway system. Okay, this is what I'd like to do. I want this section, let's say, with all these tolls on it, and we'll maintain it and employ people and all that. But you no longer, from a state standpoint, need to worry about it. We'll take care of it, but we'll keep the revenue. So I thought, wow, if that in fact is a real thing that they're debating about in Harrisburg, that worries me quite a bit. But it's
well,
I don't think
as a
that's
function of
happening.
worry, though. I mean, you're again, the whole Chinese overlord thing is kind of, I think, overblown by certain political winds that are blowing through the country right now. But the idea of if this does create a circumstance where the Chinese economy can land more softly because the money is flowing out of China, isn't that a benefit to Main Street? Wouldn't that be a good thing?
You know what? I'm not sure, and it's unfortunate that I think only time will tell. You talk about a soft landing, but if they're landing on top of us in order to cover that soft landing, I'm not so sure that's a good thing. It's a little bit hard to tell. I mean, I guess we have to add up the columns, and we can only do that once it's all said and done. Yeah. I mean, I think that the idea of there being so much influence within our four walls from any other country can be a little bit threatening, quite frankly. And I think that that's some of the issues. I mean, I think economically, everybody's trying to prosper. So from that standpoint, you think, well, if we're capitalists, let's open up the doors and see what happens.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Right. So, but I guess as a citizen, where you think, wait, is some other group going to have some level of control over us because of whatever the reason?
Or is there going to be a quid pro quo in terms of, I mean, there's a very large market that exists there.
Yes.
For us.
I'm not
so does the quid pro quo, is that something that we can count on?
I don't know if you can, and I think that's what people have always been a little bit nervous about, is that, wait a second, is there this sort of being reciprocated on the other end? I'm not so sure that it is, and I think a lot of it is, it could very well be just cultural differences. So you don't just flip the switch and cultural identities change and all of a sudden you're now part of their mainstream. Not so sure. I mean, think about like even with just Google and other groups like that trying to enter into the four walls of China. Not the easiest thing to do. No. Because of cultural reasons. Those were the roadblocks, or the major roadblocks. At least that's what it seemed like they were portraying. So it's hard to say.
I know we don't like to get political, but I mean, it seems that some of the candidates that are probably going to be just getting elected as this show airs,
right,
are very much about changing that circumstance. In other words, if there's not a quid pro quo, then it's not going to, we're not going to be so amenable.
Yeah, I don't know if you don't have that sort of reciprocity from both sides. I think that it can really at some point somebody can sort of almost like take advantage of the circumstance. You're sort of putting yourself with greater leverage than the others, and then you get to a point where you think, well, wait, is it too late to sort of back out of this? I don't know if that's the right answer. I think the right answer is to not, create barricades, but try to sort of tear down those walls and create a more fair trade type program among the countries. I think that's what ultimately, if that could occur, that's really in everybody's best interest.
All right, well, let's see if that works going forward.
Yeah, we'll see.
So, all right, well, I don't have a good segue. I can't say, speaking of tearing down barricades, well, maybe the barricades of the mind are something that we'll look to tear down now. Dr. Vivian Shnaidman from Jersey Forensic Consulting, and that's jerseyforensicconsulting.com. Is with us today. Dr. Shnaidman is an expert in the application of psychiatry to legal matters. She is known for her appearances as an expert on TV and has provided expert testimony in over 50 publish court cases. She is a medical doctor, board certified in psychiatry and forensic psychiatry. And in addition to her forensic work, she maintains a boutique clinical practice. Her publication, you have the book over here. You can give me the book. Her publications include the practice manual, Forensic Psychiatry, A Lawyer's Guide, as well as a couple of novels, which I want to ask her about, including Loosening of Associations and Homicidal Intent. Dr. Shnaidman went to medical school at the Sackler School of Medicine, and she's a graduate of Bryn Mawr College. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. It's a fascinating topic. I mean, I don't even know where to start.
Let's start with what is forensic psychiatry.
Tell us a little bit about it, because I
Okay.
think the extent of forensic type thought sort of starts and ends with CSI, or a TV show, for a lot of folks out there. So maybe you could fill in some of the details in between, please.
And I have to tell you, I used to be addicted to those shows before I became a forensic psychiatrist. And then I learned that in real life, it's not really that exciting. Although I was at a conference recently, and as I was walking down the hall, I heard somebody on the phone saying, "So did they identify that body?" And that was really cool. But forensic psychiatry is the application of psychiatry to legal matters. So anytime there is any whiff of somebody being crazy in any kind of legal case, they can call in a psychiatrist for an expert opinion. And for almost any kind of case, there is some kind of legal precedent. So whatever the case might be, some intrepid attorney can look up the case law and say, oh, can we use a psychiatrist to somehow manipulate this case in our favor? Or is there a way to ask a psychiatrist for an opinion to come out with a kind of ruling that might be favorable to our client or that might help our client? And it could be anything. It could be criminal, it could be civil, it could be in one of those kind of shady is the wrong word, but gray areas of the law, because there's a lot of things that are technically civil or criminal but seem to be overlapping.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my work, I do a lot of both. I work with criminal cases, I work with mostly civil cases, but a lot of the civil work that I do is kind of in that gray area, because I do a lot of work in the public sector, a lot of work with, in New Jersey, it's called the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, which is where they remove kids from their parents.
Oh.
I do work with estate lawyers, where somebody dies and leaves a lot of money, and then everybody fights like vultures over the spoils, and somebody has to figure out, what was the person thinking when they wrote their will. So there's a lot of different areas where psychiatric opinion kind of comes in handy for the attorneys that are working with the case. So there's a lot of different areas. I worked with sex offenders for 10 years. Kind of a big block of my life that
we can go there at some point. We can ask
Huh?
about that.
You can ask me about
we can
that.
ask about that at some point.
We
Is
need
it
a-
always the lawyers who make the decision that we want to bring a psychiatrist in, or does the court do it
The
sometimes?
court does it. Often the court does it. The court orders an evaluation. A lot of times an attorney will say, I think we need to bring in a psychiatrist. They make the argument that their client has this or that legal standing based on a psychiatric issue. So they'll ask for an evaluation.
It's interesting, though, what I find actually is interesting about this is and I would never have thought this, is the civil side. Because when you think of like forensic, really anything, and maybe it's because of the TV shows, that probably has something to do with it, a lot to do with it. You tend to think of the criminal side, but as you're starting to point out some of these areas where on the civil side where this pertains, I'm starting to run through in my own head like all these various circumstances where it makes sense, where you would have somebody give an opinion, an expert opinion about why something might go in a specific direction versus another direction, or a thought process, that kind of stuff.
Well, what's really interesting is that most criminals don't have any money.
Okay.
It seems it.
Unless I guess they're bad criminals if they don't.
Well,
They're not doing their job.
Yeah.
so well, I guess the rich criminals don't get caught, so
Yeah,
they don't
there you
need
go.
to have money. They don't need to call in a psychiatrist.
Right.
But in the general criminal world, they're not asking for psychiatric evaluations. They're just, entering into their plea agreements and they're moving on. But in the civil arena, there's a lot more money at stake. So there's a lot, many more opportunities for asking for a psychiatric expert.
That's interesting.
So I think that's why it plays out that way.
I bet. Do you think, and this is just sort of off the cuff, I'm curious, do you think that on the criminal side, that a type of psychiatric evaluation might be very beneficial? Would you like, let's assume that it was more available. Let's take money off the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I talk about that in my book. Like, I think that, this is something that is very important to me, that the law in this country assumes that everybody has the same capacity for distinguishing right from wrong. And that whenever somebody makes a choice to break the law, they've done that with the same ability as everybody else. Right?
It's not the case.
But that's really never the case.
Sure.
So ideally, you would bring in an expert in psychiatry in every single case to see where on this continuum of the ability to make a rational decision does each person fall. And then you could make, design your punishment accordingly. But that almost never happens. You either have somebody has a full ability to make a decision, a right or wrong decision, and chooses to break the law, or they're completely not guilty by reason of insanity. And there's something else called diminished capacity, which comes up every once in a while. For the most part, it never enters into the equation.
Do you think that that in terms of a law and order mentality that exists very much through society, that's something that could ever come about, where there would be just, in the same way that we have a court system that allows a defendant to defend him or herself in a criminal action, just as part and parcel of that circumstance, there would be psychiatry involved?
So that's a very interesting question, because when I was researching the book, I found out that in other countries, especially in Scandinavia, when somebody comes into the courtroom and they look crazy, the judge says, "Your guy is crazy, go get a psychiatrist." Like, it's the judge's job. Mm-hmm. Here, it's not. Here, it's basically the defendant's job. So it's the defendant's lawyer's job, because
it's the defendant's job to say, I'm crazy. I want a psychiatrist.
It's an affirmative defense.
Okay.
For somebody to say, I'm crazy and I did this because I was crazy.
It's interesting. You wouldn't necessarily think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I
Right.
3 years of law school. They didn't bring that up.
You weren't there that day?
I was absent. Well, I was more of a tax business guy than a
Yeah.
criminal. I did my criminal procedure class, and that was the last time. But from the civil side, are we talking mostly estate and matrimonial matters, or is it the guy who drives up on the other guy's lawn and gets sued for running over his dog or something? How?
I've never had a case like that, but
I guess a tort case as opposed to like an estate matter.
I think that theoretically there could be cases like that could bring in a psychiatrist. I've never been involved in one just like that. Mm-hmm. But you said earlier you might ask me about my most interesting case.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a tort case, and it was this. It was actually a horrible case, but it was two dead guys suing each other.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Okay, I gotta
because
figure that out.
I mean,
And I don't want to give away too many details because it was kind of local, but it was a murder-suicide.
Okay.
And what happened was one man murdered the new boyfriend of his former mistress.
Okay.
And then committed suicide. He shot this other man, and then he set himself on fire.
Oh.
It was
Okay.
a horrible
Yeah,
story,
I mean,
right?
that's-
And then the family of the murder victim sued the estate, basically the family of the murderer, the suicide victim, for wrongful death. And the insurance company of the murderer suicidee said that this was an intentional act and they wouldn't cover it. But in New Jersey, there's case law that said that if, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it said that if the intentional act was the product of being mentally ill, you know how they write things in these fancy words, if it was a disease of the intellect of blah, 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 but what it meant was if he was crazy when he did it, then it's not an intentional act. And I was hired to see, was he mentally ill when he did this? Well, you know, yes, of course he was mentally ill when he did this, but there is a way to, and you know, it's one of those circular logic things. You can't convince everybody of this, but there were a lot of records. There was a lot of information that this man had been treated for mental illness for a long time. They'd been on medication, that people knew that he was mentally ill, that there was a family member who was a psychologist who the police conveniently lost her interview and testimony and everything. But there was plenty of information. So that was a civil case in which would have been a criminal case if he had survived, but he didn't survive. So, you know, there's all kinds of weird cases, and I hate to say it's my favorite case because it was a horrible tragedy, but it was, you know, from an intellectual perspective, it was you know, really interesting.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, and I learned a lot from it.
How does one, you're a medical doctor.
Yes.
You went to medical school.
Yes.
And at some point you decided you were going to go into psychiatry.
Yes.
Did you decide with the idea of I'm going to be a forensic psychiatrist, or was it psychiatry before forensic psychiatry, or
I'll
how
tell you
does that
something
work?
funny. Okay, so first of all, I took a class in 10th grade called forensics, which was like debate and speech, and I really liked it because you had to like persuasively speak and convince people of things, and I knew that I was good at that. And then I was a psychology major as an undergrad, and I decided, and also like my parents are immigrants and you could only be a doctor or an engineer, which is a whole other thing. But so I was a psychology major as an undergrad, and I wanted to be a psychiatrist, and I wanted to be that kind of psychiatrist that goes to the court and explains to everybody what happened. I didn't know that that was called a forensic psychiatrist because they didn't have all those shows in those days.
Right.
But it all kind of fell into place. So I wanted to do this for a long time, and I also wanted to be a writer. Oh. So it all kind of fell into place. But it's also, you know, one of those be careful what you wish for things, because I have what I like to call my boutique private practice has about 800 patients. So, you know, I'm pretty busy.
Well,
But,
that's a good
yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that seems like a lot. Yeah, you're right. Be
Yeah.
careful what you wish
Yeah.
for. But it sounds like you love what you do every
I
day.
do. It's
Yeah.
really fun.
So tell us about the writing process. You've written the book Forensic Psychiatry: A Lawyer's Guide is obviously is a book that's written as a how-to, I suppose, for lawyers.
Yeah, so I wrote this book because I think that when a lawyer hires a psychiatrist as an expert, he or she needs to understand what the expert is talking about, like in more detail than just skipping to the part that says recommendations, or just reading the opinion part. So, right, you're a lawyer, so that would be good if you
To have more knowledge, sure.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I thought it would be a really good guide for lawyers, and there's no such thing, except now for mine. So, you know, I thought I could probably get it published, which I did.
Well, there
So
you
it
go.
was like kind of a win-win situation. And it's pretty readable because I wrote fiction first, so, and I write a lot of reports, so people can read it. My mother read it. She said it was readable.
There you go.
So you think fans of just forensic stuff would be interested in
Oh,
that?
I think
bet.
so.
Yeah,
I
it
think
seems
so.
It seems it.
Is there
What's the easiest way to
get it.
to get it? Can you?
You can get it on Amazon or
Okay.
any online. I think that their website also, it's available on the Elsevier website.
Okay.
The imprint is Academic Press.
Okay.
They all give the same discount. It's kind of expensive. I didn't set the price, they did, but.
Well, that's
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's for
out
them
of your
to do.
hands.
And the print is also kind of small. Like my father and other people's fathers all say the print is too small.
That's why I have
All
my
right,
glasses.
reading glasses,
Well,
and
this was
we'll make it work.
this may be the most
Interesting.
guest that we just can't keep up with. You know, this may be
Yeah.
the one guest that we've had that's just she's too smart for us, and
a
we
little
need to
bit
give
too
up,
small, at
run
least
up the
for
white flag.
myself, maybe. But
But you
we'll have to-
certainly, and again, you know, you don't want to spend too much time with us because you'll quit your practice because you can't
Yeah,
imagine.
I've seen it all.
You can't
I'm outta here.
imagine, right?
Oh, you guys,
You
believe
can't
me.
imagine the dark corners.
Believe me, I told you I worked with sex offenders. You guys are fine.
Yeah, that might have to be a whole
Well,
other
there we've been
a whole
cleared.
other topic for the show.
Yeah,
just
that would-
because
that would actually
we'd
be
love to
interesting.
hear about.
Yeah,
I would be
like
happy
the
to.
psychiatry.
Love to have you
We
behind
might have to
those things.
practice first without the cameras on, and then you tell me what's okay for prime time.
Yeah, well, no,
Okay,
sure,
well,
yeah,
all
I
you
mean,
kids that are home from school today, you don't
Yeah.
turn
Go
off
back
the,
to school first.
Right, turn off the
Yeah.
set.
I'm sure.
All
It's
right, well,
dark.
thank you, and we will definitely talk about having you back at
Thank
some
you
point.
so much.
Yeah, we
Pleasure.
appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Speaking of
Great.
the brain, fun facts about the human brain.
Okay.
Do you know that the brain uses more energy than any other organ?
Yeah.
Okay, people know. People that's,
Yeah, that's
kind of
pretty
intuitive,
basic.
right?
I hear
20
Jake say it all the time.
20%.
It's my command center.
But it's 20% of the body's energy supply at all times
Is from your brain.
Is being used by the brain.
Yeah,
So-
hey, use 30. I mean, it's got a lot to do as far as I'm concerned.
And you know that thing about how what's the total brain capacity that people use, and they say, oh, people only use 10% of their brain.
You know, I don't know how anybody could know any of that stuff.
I don't
either. I mean, I'm sure that maybe they do. It just seems so
Science.
complicated.
The
to
thing
me.
said that, and this is from Mara, the intern. Scientists are in agreement that we use more than 10% of our brains, but no one really knows how much.
Okay.
So,
I use like 3.
yeah, I think I'm
well below 10%.
I have like 2 neurons that
Yeah.
rub together, and that's about all that's left.
It's
And
like
then the
2
last
cricket
thing,
legs. It's like,
but it's like 2 of a very old cricket.
right.
But the last one that I just want to get out there is that your brain creates enough energy to illuminate a 25-watt light bulb while you are awake.
Like if I plugged it in
If
somehow,
you
it
could
would just-
somehow create a
amount of
source,
energy.
a flow, it's got enough power to light up a light bulb.
it's fascinating. It'd
Yeah.
be kind of neat if you could
It
somehow.
could be your own light source
You need a light bulb though.
and a wire.
Like you shove it in your ear or something.
something,
Like how
yeah.
do you do that?
I don't know.
No, I get it. I understand the idea behind it.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
get
Well,
us out of here.
Yeah, so anyway, I have just a quick thank you to the president of the FOP in Delaware County. He had an interesting story for me. We always talk about first responders. And he said, hey, listen, in the idea of talking about criminal type things and activities, I thought this made sense. We always ask you to keep in mind of those folks who are helping out in the community. And he said, this is the reason why we need to keep our eyes on them and make sure that they're doing okay. And he told me this very interesting story about a young police officer knocks on the door of a house, decides for whatever reason to move out of the way of the front door, and as soon as he does it, big shotgun blast right through the door. This is what these people are facing a lot of times on their day-to-day. Most of us don't have to deal with that on a day-to-day. So please, when you see the firefighter with the boot, throw in a few bucks. Please take care of those folks and make sure that you are being as good to them as you can. They're out there working even when you don't need them. So we'll see you out on Main Street. Thanks everybody for watching, and don't forget to check us out at raceonmain.com. Thanks.